Hey everyone, Sav Drives back here with another video, and today I'm reviewing the Mercedes G63 AMG. So let's give this car a start. Awesome startup, and let's take a look at the engine here. So popping the hood, this car has the designo exterior and interior, very beautiful. Let's take a look under here. So this car has a 5.4 liter V8 that pushes out 563 horsepower, which propels this 6,000 pound monster from 0 to 60 in about 4.8 seconds. Very beautiful car. This engine is a V8 bi-turbo, and very powerful monster here. Today when I'm talking about this car, I want to touch on how it compares to the other G-Wagon models. I had a G500 which I had an accident with. Unfortunately, I hit a deer. Cue the result here. Very cool here, those AMG rims. It also has the designo quilted interior here, which is very pretty. These seats are very comfortable. They have a lot of bolstering to them. And I'll be making an upcoming video soon where I'm gonna compare this car actually to the G55 and show you kind of how they stack up and what the differences are. I'll tell you from now, the interior on this car is much more beautiful than the one that was on the G55. So let's jump back in the cabin here, and I'll talk about some of those differences. The back of this car is actually very similar to the G55 and the previous models. There isn't much of a difference going on back here. Even those cars have heated seats back here, so the back is very similar on these cars. There's almost virtually no difference when it comes to the trunk of this car and the previous models. Another thing I noticed that's shared is the glove box. So inside the car, we have some things here to talk about. So there's the 3 diff locks on the other model. Those are not located down here but up there, and your screen is actually down here. So Mercedes in the later models push the screen up there for better visibility probably while you're driving, and push these controls down here. The AC vents were also at the top, they moved down. This part is almost exactly the same. This glove box is almost exactly the same. Even this handle, which tends to break very easily on G-Wagons, is almost exactly the same between both, right? So that's just something else to point out here. When it comes to the seat controls, they've moved them a bit. So the lock unlock button is there next to the door. On the previous models it was actually here. The seat controls are on the door, and that I think is the same between both. These actually look exactly the same, the locks on both models. And something very interesting about the G-Class that I really like is, while you have all this luxury, right, some things are very raw, right? So one thing, for example, is you have like screws that, or Phillips screws that, I mean, it just comes like this from the factory, right? They just leave them in the door. And I mean, you'll find this, you know, you could see it here also. It's kind of funny how they did that, right? It doesn't really matter, and they just put it that way. Talking more about here, we have some additional controls here to switch from comfort to sport to manual mode. That's not really on the previous models. With the G55, for example, you don't have that control there. Another thing is these heated and ventilated seats are down here. These controls are again not in the same location on the other models. This is virtually the same, the handbrake. both seats have bolstering controls. On the previous models, I believe it was only for the driver's side seat. So that's the core difference you see here when it comes to this car. Now let me talk a little about the experience, because a lot of people say that G-Wagons are not comfortable, and that's not very far from the truth, to be honest. But it's not horrible either. So let me be very clear. If you think of a Wrangler, but a much more refined version, that's kind of where the G-Class sits, in my opinion. So, for example, when you roll up the windows, right, the sound isolation is excellent within this car. And I don't know if you can tell in the video, but it is so silent here. Even when you're driving, you don't really hear anything coming from the outside. It's even that way on previous models. This glass is toughened, and they come and it says this is toughened safety glass. That's just how the G-Wagons come, and that glass actually drowns out a lot of the noise when you're driving. So I'm gonna put this car in sports mode and take it for a little spin here. So one of the first things I noticed is if I were to rank the suspension between all the G-Wagons I've driven, I'd rank the G500 probably as the most comfortable. It's very like cushiony, comfortable suspension. The G55 is probably the most horrible suspension you can get. Just out of the box, out of the factory stock, it's very rough to drive on, and I went ahead and changed that out immediately before continuing to enjoy that car because it was almost undrivable. I mean, I can't even describe how bad it is, so I swapped that car to Bilstein's, and that's very notorious on the G55s. They're like known for that, right? They're known to have very bad suspension. The G63, I believe, is a step up from the G55. I apologize, I was going to say G500. It's a step up from the G55. It's more comfortable, the suspension. It's definitely not horrible. It's livable, and I mean, you don't really need to swap it out. You can drive it like this every day. It's totally fine. But again, I think the G500 is king here when it comes to the suspension. Now, in terms of engine responsiveness and smoothness, I would kind of circle back again to that same thing, right? I think the G500 actually makes a better daily driver. It's the engine is very smooth. Something a lot of people don't like talk about is the G500 actually shares the same engine as a lot of the cheaper cars back from that era. So if anything were to go wrong with the G500, an engine swap would be actually quite cheap, which is crazy. On a G-Wagon, you can find those engines used for like, I don't know, like $2 grand or around that range, right? And that's crazy to say. It has no turbos, no superchargers, just a very simple engine. The G55 is not as responsive as the G500 because of the supercharger, but it really picks up the power quickly. That's because it's a clutch-driven supercharger, and there's no lag really. When you put your foot down, that car just goes. It's very fast, and I'll make a video on that car soon. Now, the G63 does have turbo lag when you drive it, right? There's a bit of a delay, but once it gets going, right, it's a very fast car. It really just flies. So that's something to note here. Now, the car, in terms of like creaks and sounds, actually doesn't really have all that much. I'm driving with no sounds on, so you can kind of have a perspective of what it sounds like to be in this car. I mean, really, there isn't much. I think it's actually more refined than the previous models. The previous models will tend to creak a lot, especially with age. You have panels, you know, getting creaky, and you know, it can get frustrating. Like, something that's nice about these newer ones, I mean, even if you look around the seat belts here, I don't know if it's very clear, but they've added Velcro to a lot of the areas here, which kind of deadens the sound and reduces the creakiness within the vehicle. Just commenting on the car in general, when you drive it around, this car does get a lot of attention. A lot of people will be looking at you when you're driving. You just have to get used to it. You know, everywhere you stop, someone's going to ask you, hey, what do you do for work? Things like that. So in terms of how much these cars attract attention, it's a lot. And even when I've driven my G55, right, it gets the same attention. The difference in design between those cars is not that much, and I'll point those differences out also in an upcoming video, but just just to tell you off the top of my head, right, the mirrors on the more modern ones fold. They have a blind spot assist. Their design is different. It's actually the same mirror that comes on the generation C-Class, I believe, in E-Class. It's shared, but it looks sleeker. It looks pretty cool. The one on the older models is just kind of like a square, right? And I'll discuss that in a future video. The other thing is where that grille is, you have the daytime running lights, and that grille is actually a bit more expanded, right? So you can see those daytime running lights. Sorry, I said grill, the bull bar, you know, for protection from impact. That one is actually longer on this one, and on the G55 it's shorter because there are no DRLs there, so you don't really need that there, right? So the differences in design are really not that big. And another thing to point out is a lot of people will install, you know, the updated grille and updated headlights and things like that. There's plenty of kits out there. A lot of people do that. I like to keep my G55 looking classic, just like it was the day it came off the showroom floor, and that's what it looks like. So yeah, I mean, it's just I think they're all beautiful cars. They all look very, very similar. Other things to point out here is interior ambient lighting is a lot more in this car. There's a lot of lighting going on, and it looks very nice at night when you drive. It's very comfortable in terms of that. The gauges are nicer. Obviously, you have this kind of carbon fiber look where the odometer is, and it's a very cool look for this car for sure. Lots of awesome things going on here with this interior. With the previous one, the gauge was actually the same one that's on the C-Class, but on the AMG model they added some insignia, like that it's a compressor, and they added like this silver kind of plate in the center, which makes it a little more special. And again, I'll be showing this in an upcoming video, so please stay tuned. And there goes another deer. Very nice. One already took my G500 out, and take a look at that. They're practicing out here, getting ready to do it again. So that's interesting. So over here shortly, I'm gonna test the car and give it a 0 to 60 run, and we'll see how it does. So let's take a look here. So quick 0 to 60 test here. Here we go. And I mean, this thing is fast. It is a very fast car. Really, you know, packs quite some power. When it gets going and those turbos spool up, it really does not feel like a car that weighs 6,000 pounds. It's very, very quick. And yeah, you should always, you know, be careful with these cars because they weigh a lot and they're really fast. So overall, I mean, I think these are very fun cars. They're great cars to own, but you have to go into it with the expectation that you're buying kind of a utilitarian vehicle. Like, it's not meant to be overly luxurious, or, you know, I mean, yes, the interior looks great, but I mean in terms of the comfort, right? It looks really cool, so that the car kind of has a mixed personality, right? With the older ones, the interior wasn't as, you know, luxurious, but with these ones, it's kind of like, okay, it's nice, right? But you have to be mindful. So something I want to talk about when driving this car is you have to be very careful with the steering and the body roll. This car has a ton of body roll. It's very easy to go quickly, accidentally, and not notice, you know, that you have a turn coming up or something. Trust me, I've been driving for a very long time, and this happens very easily with this car. And if the steering, as you can see, isn't very responsive, see, I'm wiggling it, the car really doesn't do much with your input. So you really have to be careful with the amount of body roll this car has. You might find yourself like getting into a turn and like you have a ton of body roll, and it gets a bit concerning, right? So just be mindful when you're driving this car. It's not, you know, don't let the fact that it's an AMG fool you. This is not a track car. This is not like a BMW X6M, which it feels like it's on rails. No, not at all. This thing feels like, again, it's like a refined Wrangler. So imagine a lot of power with very little stability. So again, be careful. This is meant to be an off-roader, so take that into account. One other item I want to touch on is the maintenance of this car. Items will come up. A lot of things that fail on these cars is like the door locks, for example. To fix one door lock is probably around $400 or $450. There are some additional issues, right? Like if you have a problem with your wheel bearings, the front wheel bearing service for both sides is around $6 grand. I know it sounds like it's crazy, but it's true. I mean, there are some shops that will do it for $3, but that's just something to know, right? These cars are have very sophisticated front end systems. They're actually very similar to the kind of older generation Land Cruisers. They're very beefy systems, which last a very long time, but when something goes wrong there, they have to be fixed, and fixed properly. They cannot be taken to someone that doesn't know what they're doing, because it will cost you more. If it was done wrong and your axle got damaged, guess what? Now this is a $7,000 repair. So you have to be very mindful of that. I have low fuel here, and I'll be taking it for gas here shortly. So I'll just keep that in mind. So as it's getting dark here, just some final closing thoughts about this car. Overall, it's a great car. If you're getting into this, you need to get into it with the mentality of this is not like an S-Class. It does have some luxury features, but it is by no means as comfortable as an S-Class or anything like that. It's a utilitarian vehicle. You know, it's very similar to a refined Wrangler, and repair costs can be very expensive on these cars, especially if they were not maintained properly. So you should keep that in mind if you are planning to buy one of these. So overall, I love these cars. A lot of people think they're uncomfortable or they have bad steering, but I think they're going into these cars for the wrong reasons. If you're looking for something very luxurious and comfortable, something like a Range Rover would probably fit that bill better than this car. Hope you like this video. Please subscribe, leave a comment below, and stay tuned for more. I'll be making a video on the G55 soon. Thanks everyone.